Welcome to Digication Scholars Conversations. I'm your host, Kelly Driscoll. In this episode, you'll hear part 2 of my conversation with Kaitlyn Coskun, a recent graduate of Texas Christian University. More links and information about today's conversation can be found on Digication's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Full episodes of Digication Scholars Conversations can be found on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. So at Digication, we talk a lot about the use of our platform as a way for students to be able to be seen, be heard, and be recognized. And thinking back to when you were starting to learn about Digication and start sharing some of the things that you were doing, did you feel that kind of did you feel that kind of relationship with the platform? Were you interested in being seen and being heard and being recognized, and maybe some of the ways that you were able to use the tools to achieve that?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. I was first introduced to Digication and this ePortfolio platform through one of my classes at TCU. It was in my fashion merchandising major, and my teacher at the time, Dr. Fortenberry, chose this platform for us to use in our career development course, really in an effort to gear us up to graduate. So I think this was about my senior year, first semester that I started it, and it definitely took some time to create it in full, which is constantly evolving as well. But to get kind of an idea of what I wanted to do with it, the intention behind it ultimately was to provide me as a student entering the workforce soon with a tool to really showcase my achievements, kind of what I've been working on, what I'm able to do, and get this information out to future employers, or if at the time, I didn't know if I maybe wanted to pursue further education, whoever it may be, kind of like compiling all of my achievements and work thus far into one place and having that be a centralized location to share it with others, And I feel like a good ePortfolio, it's both a product, a digital collection, of my artifacts and what I've worked on, maybe that be presentations or papers or research projects, social media examples, things like that. But it's also a process of, in the making of it, really reflecting on those moments and those achievements that I've had and kind of what they present in me and how they can represent me to others. And I feel like in the past, I'm sure there was like written examples, physical portfolios maybe that you could bring in to a job interview. But having the ePortfolio, it made this invisible learning that was going on in school visible. But not only that, it made it mobile so anyone could see it. It wasn't just I had one copy of it that I had to manually bring everywhere. It was so easy having it online where I could just take that link and share it forward with even just connections that I was reaching out to in an effort to find a job, references, people in careers that I was looking to for inspiration, mentors, things like that. There's so many different source or groups of people that it was geared towards, and having it all together in one place online was so beneficial. And I feel like LinkedIn, for example, is a great networking platform, and it has all of my like background and my previous jobs and experience and things like that, but it doesn't even compare to like what I'm able to create on here or on Digication's ePortfolio, because the ePortfolio allowed me to use all different sorts of media, whether that be the written text of reflections on things, the projects that I actually worked on. I could upload PowerPoints or presentations that I did, photographs that I took, and different social media platforms that I played around with, and feeds, all sorts of things. Video I could upload there as well. So having all that there was so invaluable and was like the ultimate goal from the start. And it just progressed even further than what I could imagine, kind of a thing. And it's certainly helped me post-grad, graduating and post-grad, kind of all of the above, because now I'm able to even look back on that, having created it in college when everything was so fresh, and I was currently going through it. And over time, I've realized my memory is not as great as I wish it was. And being able to, yeah, exactly. And I'm like so grateful that I was able to not only just get all of that, all of the actual artifacts into one location, but also the reflective periods that I chose, or places that I chose to write up my lessons that I learned and key skills that I gained and my favorite parts of it, stuff like that. Like reading through it makes it so much easier to recall things moving forward. Mm-hmm. So it's certainly been a blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing how, for you, it's different from something like LinkedIn. People that are kind of new to this kind of platform sometimes have those questions, and LinkedIn is, clearly a valuable tool for so many. But as you mentioned, it has a kind of standard format.
Yep.
And, just thinking about that compared to this real kind of personal branding and customization and stories that went into each of your experiences right alongside the actual kind of products that you created is so rich and so different from, this kind of scroll down, these are the bullet points of my experience. And I do think it gives people the opportunity to share so much more about who they are and how they've grown. I think LinkedIn's done a beautiful job in creating this network and allowing people really to share kind of a profile / resume. And we're kind of giving people that opportunity, with all of those bullets, what are the real stories that happened during that time, right? Let if you're really interested in this individual, this is where you can really go in and learn more about them, what their passions are, what drives and motivates them, where they may have encountered challenges and grown from that, and really get a sense of the person. And, your kind of culminating portfolio really exemplifies that. And you talked a little bit about this reflective process. Was that something that you learned during your time at TCU, or do you feel like reflecting on your experience is something that you brought with you into college? What was that like? And had you shared reflections like that with other people before? Sometimes that's a totally new thing for people too.
No, that's a great point. I do think my Digication portfolio was one of the first places where I've put it out there for just anyone kind of to see. Again, as I've mentioned, I've always been such a visual person. So I've never shied away from sharing a photo or posting on social media or, that kind of thing I was very comfortable with. But sharing written message and my internal feelings about a certain thing or kind of how it's guided me through something was something a little bit new, which is great because I do love pushing myself. I think it's it was a great opportunity to not only share the academic side of things and the actual skills that I learned that can be used for a job, but also kind of who I am, how I process things, how I make meaning of things. And I've definitely always been a introspective person. I love to reflect. I loved to diary as a kid. But of course, all those things were very internal, personal, nothing I particularly shared. And while the information on my ePortfolio isn't particularly emotional, it was information of how I chose to process things, and sharing that with the viewer or whoever is reading it does add another layer than just the simple text on the resume that is shown on LinkedIn, like you mentioned. I feel like platforms like that are extremely valuable, of course, and the networking part of it is something I've used a lot. But it's more so, how do you get the information across in the easiest, simplest way possible? I feel like there's a lot more like condensing things down, just to have the recruiter know that you graduated with this and have this skill like bullet pointed. Whereas my ePortfolio, it gave me a platform to really dive deeper and share with them not only the skills that I have, but who I am. And I think that is one of my favorite things about it. And then even going back and looking on it now, it's an archive of kind of who I was and how I was feeling at that given time. And it helps like my memories so much. Like it takes me just right back. Like even just reading the smallest paragraph of my reflection on a project that I did sophomore year, for example, it's helped a lot in the retention of the information that I got at that time and using that moving forward. So it's been good. I was very intentional in what I wanted to use on the platform, like what categories I wanted to share. And so on my page, I have a bar up at the top with all the main ones that I thought would be important. And I wanted to start it off with an about me, which I think makes sense intuitively. And I just shared my story there briefly, of course. But I also wanted to include additional elements. So a photo of myself, a quote that was important to me, and something I continue to update over time to help relay the message that I am continuing to update this. I'm here, and like this is something that's important to me for people who are looking at it. Whereas I feel like sometimes people will look on things and be like from high school or from college and think that they just made it then and they've left it there, kind of a thing. And on my homepage at the very bottom, I update it every year just with things that I enjoy or maybe like what I'm doing the most at the time. And yeah, and then a goal that I have, I think is up there right now. And then I've also included a strengths quest, which I think maybe that's the specific branded title of the one that I did, but there's all sorts of, those self-assessments to kind of get to what are your strengths. So including that was also an important element that I don't feel like recruiters will see elsewhere. That's not something often uploaded or shown on your job application or resume and stuff like that. And so linking my Digication when I send out information about myself helps them just learn a lot more about me on a professional level as well as on a personal level, which I feel like is at the core of what business is these days.
Yeah. And when you're viewing the Strengths Quest results and then going through and viewing your work, it's just like everything lined up.
Yep, exactly. It makes sense,
It all makes sense.
Yeah, my strengths are I'm a developer, I have empathy, achiever, context, which is really just pulling from past experiences, and then
Mm-hmm.
consistency, which I feel like
Mm-hmm.
all of those things you can see throughout
Mm-hmm.
the way that I designed and what information I put into my profile. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
And you were
certainly
talking a little
translates.
bit. Oh, sorry.
Oh
Finish
no, that
that
was
thought.
it. That was it. It translates.
I was just thinking, so you were mentioning a little bit about how, you were thinking about how you wanted to organize all of your work. And we see students kind of come to this with different ideas and also input from various instructors that they might be working with or thinking about, who the audience is that may be viewing it. Could you talk a little bit about maybe what that was like for you? You're just logging in and getting started. Um, how did you decide, what you wanted that kind of top level hierarchy to be? You've got so much content that you wanted to share. And I don't know off the top of my head how many pages are in that culminating
I don't
portfolio,
either,
but
but
it's a
it might
lot.
take time to
It's
count.
a lot.
Yeah.
But it's all really well. I mean, you can tell a lot of consideration went into that. The pages all have titles that would make sense for viewers coming from all different places, not just internal to
Yeah.
TCU. And I would love to hear just a little bit about what your process is like. Did how things were organized change and shift as you were creating it? Have they changed or shifted at all after graduation? I love that you go back in and keep updating goals and
Yeah, references, my
yeah,
resume, yeah, different things like that.
yeah.
I always try to update. But yeah, thinking back to when I was first creating it, the overall categories, I had support from my teacher at the time, Dr. Fortenberry. She
Mm-hmm.
helped us as a class get the biggest overview topics that she felt were the most valuable
Mm-hmm.
and easily understandable. And then from there, we kind of took the reins and were able to create the portfolio that made the most sense for us.
Mm-hmm.
So my top categories were the About Me page that I just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
resume, references, learning experiences, which included a deeper dive subcategories of specific classes that I
Mm-hmm.
took that I felt like would be really valuable to showcase. And then activities that I was involved in, honors that I received. And then towards the end, or actually, I must have created this junior year because now that I'm thinking about it, I added information.
A lot
Yeah,
was
maybe.
going on.
Yeah, a lot was going on. All the years kind of blur after a certain point. But I did have another tab for internships, which
Yes.
I had one in between my junior and senior year. And I also had some when I was younger that I personally just added in as supplemental information as well. And so there's a deep dive into my internships and how that process looked and what I gained from that, as well as just work exhibits and artifacts from jobs that I had. I did a lot of social media work and influencer relations throughout
Mm-hmm.
college at different companies. And so some of the social media feeds and my strategy behind that I included on the work level tab, which I'm going to go into and update with my current work and what I've done and accomplished, because I think that'll be very beneficial as well. But those were my overall categories, most of
Mm-hmm.
which had subcategories within them. And they're pretty self-explanatory, which I'm glad that you mentioned that it did translate that way, so that
Yes.
it's easy to look through from an outsider's perspective. But I think two of the core categories that I knew that I needed would be the learning experiences that encompassed a handful of classes that I felt were most important and that I learned the most hard and soft skills that would translate into a work environment. So I basically listed like a new page per class, included what we call artifacts, which is basically just work that's been done, something like tangible, that like a PowerPoint or a design project or a poster board, a sketch, whatever it may be pertaining to that class. I would include that. So I always had a visual, as well as a write-up, which is the reflection that I was talking about. And I included the class title just for reference. I figured other students would maybe be looking on it and get inspiration from it and perhaps want to find that class if they go to TCU. And then information on what those visual artifacts are, kind of when I took the class, and then that write-up summary of what I experienced, what I gained from it, the skills that can be translatable to a career, and that is probably, looking back on it, one of the most valuable categories, because otherwise, like I said, memory kind of goes away over time. I would have certainly had somewhere in my computer these projects and like artifacts, but actually going and finding them, like, have you ever gone into a computer trying to like just go
Looking
through your
through
documents and
old
stuff? Like, that's not fun. Not fun. No one does that, really. I feel like it just kind of gets lost in the cloud. But having it all on here has been so helpful looking back on my education. And then also that internship tab was very beneficial as I was graduating looking for a job, because it really outlined the practical experience I had, what I learned, the connections I made, projects that I had. So there's a really good deep dive in there. And I did partner with the company that I interned with, as well as guidance from my education at TCU to also get feedback from my supervisors at the time, like written up. And that was something I wanted to include for prospective employers to be able to access as well. So, yeah.
I would love to hear about that. So we do get, sometimes people, are interested in Digication specifically for these kind of experiential learning experiences. Where students are, doing internships or study abroad or field experiences, if they're interested in going into healthcare, teaching. And so they're often, out in the field doing, hands-on work within the kinds of organizations that they're hoping to be in potentially after graduation. And so could you share a little bit about maybe from those internships, what kinds of artifacts you were able to include? Maybe going back and looking at that, what it's like to read about your experiences in the internships. And did you use Digication in order to help get those internships, or did you share what you created in Digication to get recognized for some of the career opportunities that you have now? I'd love to hear about that.
So to start off with your first question of the internships that I had and the kind of artifacts that I was able to collect, as I said, I am a visual person, so I certainly am someone who likes to document what's going on, usually through photo, but also in all other ways, data collection, project management, and things like that. So exiting or going into and exiting my summer internship the year before my senior year, I had the intention of collecting the items that I was able to contribute to because I knew that this would be beneficial for a portfolio. Seeing as I did create the portfolio in advance, having even just that recognition or knowledge
Right.
of
You've
it
got a
going
place.
into it,
Yeah.
it gave me a place to need to put those things.
Yeah.
So I actively throughout my internships would write down things that I accomplished, collect the artifacts that I discuss or photos of visiting certain locations on the job, which my junior to senior internship was right when COVID hit. So that kind of changed a lot of things.
Yeah.
And there was certainly a fear at one point that it might not work out and line up after
Yes,
having
I'm
gotten it.
sure.
Right. Yeah. And so I was lucky enough that the company that I worked for, our tier years, was able to easily transfer the internship to be done remotely, even though it was based here in Dallas. And I did end up remaining in Fort Worth on campus that summer for other classes I was taking as well. There wasn't much opportunity to actually go in and take the photos that I so normally like. But I did get an opportunity or two on occasion. And so I took those and collected photos of some of the products I was working on. I visited the showroom and was able to gather some imagery there. I had to go in for a couple projects of supporting the warehouse, kind of just as an intern, additional tasks that would support the company. And I helped with organization and counting parts and getting things to where they needed to be, especially during COVID when things were a bit awry. So exactly. And I never hate when someone asks me to support in another area because I always see it as an opportunity to grow and learn something new. So even if it wasn't like the core of my job that summer, I was happy to do so and was able to connect with other individuals as well, which is great. But for that internship, I collected a lot of pictures when I was able to go in. I also, at the end of the internship, compiled different documents that I supported or created throughout. Certainly, when you're doing this, disclaimer to talk to your supervisor and make sure that that's information that you're able to share.
I have a conversation about what can be shared.
Exactly. You don't want to be leaking any privileged information. But I did wait until after, because I was working on the new collection that was going to be coming out. I was a product development and management intern, so I didn't release that information online until those items were out. So little disclaimer there, but still valuable to collect that information to be able to use down the line, when you're able to, if you're able to. But I also had weekly reports and meetings with my supervisor on the job, and I was able to share that feedback and then feedback on that feedback of how I'd improved, which shares a lot of information with a prospective employer. We did book clubs during the internship, so I was able to kind of reflect on what I'd learned there, as well as connections and references. And then I took the opportunity to also create an end of internship kind of exit presentation. So that also did like a overall summary of going into it, kind of what I was expecting, how I learned through things, and what I got out of it. So that was a great visual to be able to include on my portfolio as well. But also apart from that internship, I did one earlier over in Europe with my family's company at Moda Textile. And there was nothing I needed to do in connection to my schoolwork with that internship, but I did take the liberty to honestly just do a similar compilation and reflection on what was done, what I learned, who I connected with on a daily basis, since that was a more condensed opportunity. And I was actually going and visiting different countries and meeting with prospective vendors. And if I wasn't to have created that file and that compilation of information, it would be so hard to remember the ins and outs of what I really did learn, like 8 years ago or so, like more than 8 years ago. So I do think it's so valuable. Like if you're a student listening to this, or honestly at any age in any profession, like keeping track of what it is that you're learning and the accomplishments that you're making as you're going through it is so beneficial, and definitely one of my biggest pieces of advice is because you're your best advocate. Like you're the person who's going to have to get this information out to others. And having a place to go back to reference little things here and there, it adds up. And then you're able to use that for a new job maybe that you're interested in, or a compensation review, or maybe you'll discover a new interest that you have or habit or something that'll create a whole new career path for you. But yeah, and then sharing it on a platform like this, on an ePortfolio, just makes it so much easier. Having it all in one place.
Yeah. And I love what you said about, you're your best advocate, and that you can use a tool like this to have everything that you need to support advocacy for yourself. It can speak for you when you're not there, but you also have the opportunity to review and see for yourself all that you are and the things that you value and the skills that you have. If you're ever having a time where you're questioning if you're on the right path or doing what you're capable of, it's always something that you can refer back to, and then always something that you can share out with other people. So thank you.
Yes, certainly. And the quote actually that I have on my first page of my About Me on my ePortfolio, it kind of goes in line with that there's really only two things in life that are in your total control, and that's your attitude and your effort. Yes. And it really goes to show the level of intention and drive that you have to be able to take a task or something that you're working on, use it, reflect on it, and then be able to have that as something that can personify you through others looking on your site, whether or not you're directly giving it to them. I actually tested it out. If I type my name into Google, it's the second thing that pops up. I'm not sure if that's your guys' SEO killing it, or
that's what we want for you.
Exactly. Which is exactly what I want as well. So yeah, totally agree with you there.
Yes. Oh, well, Kaitlyn, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story and your experience and your insights for other students that might be listening. And you're right, we're all lifelong learners. So this is something that's of value really to anyone. We believe that strongly too. And I'm looking forward to sharing your story. So thank you again for joining me on Digication Scholars Conversations.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was so fun, and I'm so happy to stay in touch moving forward.
Yes, please. Thank you, and take good care.
You too.
Bye. Coming up next, we'll be chatting with Bill Torgerson, a lecturer in rhetoric and composition at Appalachian State University. Here's a quick preview.
This would be what I would point to as a coach and as a professor. The ability to learn content, the ability to present the content in an engaging way that makes it easily digestible to the audience, whether it's a player or a student, Those are really important in both of those spaces and probably strengths of mine.